Oracle installation and database creation. In this nugget, we'll discuss the various Oracle editions available to us from their main website, that's oracle.com. There's about 5 different editions available, and in the trial version, all of them are free, but once you use them in a production environment, they have varying costs. Then we'll discuss the installation prerequisites. Now, of course, you will need a machine to run Oracle off of, but in addition to that, you'll need to know how much memory to use and how much disk space you'll need. Then we'll discuss the Oracle Universal Installer. This is otherwise known as the OUI. Okay, this is a graphical or a command line tool that helps you install the software. Now, when you're running this, you do have an option to create a database at the same time. So optionally, you can launch the DBCA, or Database Creation Assistant. Now, that can be run as a wizard, a graphical wizard, or it can be run at the command line with what we call a response file. So this is what is known as a quiet install. Now, there's a third way of creating a database, and that is completely from scratch. You can do it manually. If you're one of those people that likes to build everything from scratch just to get the self-satisfaction, hey, you can try this, whatever curls your toes. Okay, so I will show you how to do this. And then the last thing we'll discuss are special considerations for Windows versus Linux and Unix. So here we have our Oracle editions. You can download all of these from Oracle's main website. The first one that I briefly want to mention is the Lite edition. This is used to build, manage, and deploy web applications for mobile devices, such as cell phones and PDAs. Next, we have the Express edition. This is a smaller type of database. You can only have up to 4 gigabytes of data. The machine that it's running on can only be up to 1 gigabyte of memory and running on only 1 CPU. Next, we've got Standard Edition 1. This has to be purchased for 5 users minimum, and it can be up to 2 processor machine. And this has some web application tools in addition to all the things that came with the Express Edition. Now, this does cost some money, but you can still download it for free as long as you're not using it in a production environment. Then there's the Standard Edition. It does cost a little bit more than the Standard Edition 1. However, it does support what we call a clustered environment. You might hear the term RAC, which stands for Real Application Clusters. It simply means that we have the ability to have more than one database instance tapping into a database. Now, the last edition that we'll talk about is the Enterprise Edition, which involves Captain Picard and a few Borgs. It goes where no database has gone before. Really, this is just the Cadillac of all the different editions. It has everything the Standard Edition has, plus some really neat features dealing with data guard. That's in case you've got one database going down, another one can pick up where it left off. Also, it has some data mining features as well as some data warehousing tools, analytic processing tools. We've got all sorts of nice bells and whistles that come along with this. One of my favorite features is called flashback, where you can actually flashback a whole database. So it's kind of like pushing the rewind button and saying, okay, I messed up. I want to rewind the whole database 5 minutes ago. Or you can undrop tables, do things like that. You know, another great feature of the Enterprise Edition is the ability to perform rolling upgrades. That just means we can install Oracle patches without having to bounce the database or the server that it's on. You can also perform parallel operations with this edition. That simply means that you can do really intensive queries with more than one process at the same time. So you just have more oomph to your queries. Now, this list of features here is not at all complete, but these are my favorite features of the Enterprise Edition. We can talk more about these extra add-ons in the OCP course. Before you download any Oracle software, you do want to make sure that you have all the right prerequisites on your machine. For example, enough memory, enough disk space, the right OS. And so the way you do that is just open up a browser, go to tahiti.oracle.com like I have up here. To access this website, you will have to register your email address. It is free, however. So just click on the first link for 10G Release 2, and it takes you to the documentation. It's a nice tabular format. We can just go to the first page, scroll down to the quick installation guides, and I'm going to find the documentation for Windows. Okay, so now we're on the main page here. We can scroll down, and it talks about all of the hardware requirements and software requirements. Let's talk about your prerequisites for Oracle installation. Now, if you're running on Linux, you're going to need at least 1024 megabytes of RAM. So the way we find that out is just type in grep memtotal/proc/meminfo. And yes, that is case sensitive. Okay, next we're going to check how much swap space there is. Well, how much swap space you need really depends on how much RAM you've got. So here I've included a nice little chart on the side. If you have under 1024 megabytes of RAM, you're going to need twice as much swap space. So in other words, if we've got 1,000 megabytes of RAM, you're going to need 2,000 megabytes of swap. Then we have other categories here. For example, if you've got over 8192 megabytes of RAM, then you will only need 0.75 times that amount of swap space. Okay, so we use the grep command to find out how much swap space. Grep swap total/proc/meminfo. Next, you're going to need 400 megabytes of disk space in your /temp directory. The way we can find that is just do a df-k. You can actually be in any directory. Make sure you do this as root. Then you want to also make sure you've got between 1.5 to 3.5 gigabytes of disk space, as well as 1.2 gigabytes of disk space for the database. So this value up here is just for the Oracle software. And of course you want to make sure that you've got the right processor type. In other words, you want to make sure that it's actually supported by Oracle. So just grep model name /proc/CPU info, see what your output is, and then go to the documentation that I showed you on tahiti.oracle.com. Make sure it's one of those supported platforms. Additional items you need to be aware of on Linux and Unix are creating the proper users and groups. So you need to make sure that you have an Oracle user. This is the user that's going to own all the data files. And you also need to have a user called nobody. And that's used in conjunction with the HTTP daemon for Enterprise Manager. You also need to create the groups DBA and OInstall. Anyone who belongs to the DBA group then has sys privileges on the database. The OInstall is used for the Oracle Universal Installer. Okay, so also you need to make sure that you have the proper kernel parameters. So you would look at the documentation and then make sure that you have the proper parameters mentioned in the docs by logging in as root and then typing in sysctl-a. Now, if you find that your parameters aren't correct, then you'll need to modify them. So you'll go into the etc syscontrol-conf file, make your modifications, and then type in sysctl-p to make your changes stick. Then, of course, you need to make sure that you have the proper environment variables set. You must have the Oracle SID and the Oracle Home set. On Windows, you can get away with your Oracle Home not being set, but on Unix and Linux, it must be set. Okay, and then you will run the installer to launch the OUI. So when I make references in this demonstration of the setup program, well, if you're running on Unix or Linux, make sure you say run installer instead. On Windows, you're going to need at least 256 megabytes of RAM. 512 is actually recommended. Take that recommendation seriously. I've had Oracle on Windows take my machine down to a screeching halt. As far as virtual memory, you'll need double whatever your RAM is. For your disk space, have at least 2.04 gigabytes just for the Oracle software, and then of course you'll need space for your data. You'll need 550 megahertz processor minimum. Most likely you have a faster machine than that anyway. And you need to, of course, be able to display at least 256 colors. So, how do you find out that information on Windows? Well, let's go to our control panel by clicking Start, Settings, Control Panel. And you'll see the System icon. Go ahead and double-click on that. And here's most of our information. We've got 2.2 gigahertz machine, 512 megabytes RAM. That looks good so far. Let's find out.